Hi, you're listening to the Professional Speaks podcast with me, Craig McKellar, your host. As an ex-Big Four auditor for 6 years, I now run a specialist recruitment consultancy called McKellar Consulting. Throughout this podcast, I speak to senior leaders from the professional services community, past, present and future. These leaders work in accounting and finance, audit, tax, corporate finance, consulting, legal and investments. In the comfort of their own office, I will be posing questions to our guests to gain insights from them across a variety of topics, including balancing work and life, mental health and mindset, risk-taking, and effective leadership. These insights will help us learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what we want to achieve in our careers. Here's what's coming up on today's episode.
Ultimately, it is a people business, and backing the right people and that chemistry, because if it's wrong, even if the business has a fantastic market position, it has a fantastic product or services that they're selling, but that chemistry between investor and management team / owners isn't right, it's probably going to break and fall down in the future. So get that right first, have that honest discussion that you can share the same goals and ambitions of where you see the business going in the next 3, 4, 5 years. Because if you don't get that right, then the relationship will probably break later down the line.
In today's episode, I am joined by Duncan Thorburn, who is an investment manager at Foresight Group, which is one of the UK's most active growth company investors, typically investing up to £15 million in companies across all sectors and stages. Topics discussed include transitioning from working in corporate finance to private equity, the importance in backing people rather than businesses, and what the private equity market is like in Scotland. So for listeners and viewers who are listening into this episode, Duncan, just introduce yourself. You're investment manager at Foresight Group, which is the UK's or one of the UK's largest company growth investors, and you typically invest up to £15 million in companies across all sectors and stages. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Craig.
And yeah, it's always good to start off with who you are and a bit about your background and things like that. So would you mind sharing some?
Yeah, sure. So I born in London and I moved up to Scotland when I was 12. And then kind of at school, I'd always had this I weirdly enjoyed accountancy, and so I got a little bit excited when I managed to make my balance sheet balance, and therefore kind of saw my career going into accountancy. So I applied for and got into Edinburgh University, studied business studies and accounting, did my 3 years there, and then part of that course was giving you credits towards your CA training. So ICAS was what I always wanted to do, go into in terms of the oldest accountancy body in the world, and decided to go in the more unusual route of working in the bank to get my CA qualification. So I chose to go via RBS in their finance graduate program, and did various finance placements across the bank. And after that, I decided to get out of that and moved my first kind of role outside my qualification and moved into restructuring as a first step.
Great. And I mean, was there any influence in the family or maybe outside the family for you to kind of go into accounting or into banking?
No, I think in my entire family, I think only one other relative had actually gone to university. And so, both no real influence from home. I just kind of I always felt a bit different to the rest of my family in that way. So there's no really been influence in terms of moving into accounting or finance. It was just something I kind of had naturally enjoyed numbers growing up, that strange kid. And then, I enjoyed accountancy at school, and then saw that as a kind of a way to kind of open up a lot of doors. Initially, I had ambitions to maybe use the qualification to abroad. Obviously, that didn't transpire that way, but that was kind of the CA was something that could stand across different regions across the globe, and that's why I chose the profession.
And you're right. I mean, you wanted to go into accounting, and I guess banks did have their graduate programs, but you probably also were thinking of going into, a large accountancy firm. Do you remember? I know it's way back now, but do you remember kind of why you decided to go the banking route rather than maybe working for a professional services firm?
I think I just wanted to go a slightly different path. I knew both paths ended into the same result in achieving my CA. Part of that, Cecilia, was financial reasons. As just coming out of the graduate program, the rewards of that, of going and doing it via the banking way was one option. And then I just thought, I'd spoken to a few people who'd gone down the same path, and they had a great experience and opened up a lot of different doors for them. So it's something I analysed, looked into further, and I thought actually it's going to be, it still gives me that platform to build my career thereafter. And that's why I went down the slightly unconventional route.
Yeah. And I mean, how was it? What were you doing? For people that might not be too familiar with restructuring.
So when I finished my graduate program and moved into restructuring, it was a slightly different environment, working from the finance graduate team and working with internal stakeholders to actually working with real people and real businesses. And a lot of the times where things hadn't always gone to plan. So businesses that are highly leveraged, and a lot of businesses that were affected by the financial crash, increase in property prices crashing down, working capital being squeezed, and for someone who kind of fairly fresh-faced, having to have challenging conversations with business owners and entrepreneurs when times were tough was quite a steep learning curve, but a really important one to kind of move out from where I'd originally kind of started dealing with just internal stakeholders. So I think it's really important for my career to kind of move into, I suppose, the real but challenging world.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, would you say that that's kind of set you up for then moving into corporate finance? So if we're talking about your career, it was at the bank, finance restructuring, then it was corporate finance, kind of M&A, and then private equity now. So, and you can talk more about that. But would you say that what you learned with people and restructuring set you up for the rest of your career? No,
definitely. I think it's about, it gave me a really good skill set to apply to. I think it was a good 3 years working in restructuring, but I didn't see myself when I went into it that was going to be my career forever. And then setting up to go to corporate finance, it was trying to look at things with things a bit glass half full rather than half empty, and trying to do the same things. I was trying to help owner managers, help businesses grow and reach their aspirations, but in a more positive light into corporate finance. And when I worked in RBS, I worked with a number of different businesses and sectors, and I really enjoyed the variety. And I think the thing I liked about corporate finance is you're doing some of the same stuff, albeit a different light, and selling the opportunity, selling the dream, rather than necessarily trying to preserve what you've built and what you've got. So it definitely gave me that kind of step up into that and set me up for my career going forward. And then laterally, the corporate finance skills I learned then moving into private equity, dealing with the same SMEs, same growing businesses day in, day out, but again, looking at it from a different lens that I do now compared to when I was an advisor, where you're on sell side mandates, trying to sell the business, trying to do the analysis of who's the right buyer for you, who's the right investor for you, and what are the kind of the growth aspirations, what are the growth aspirations of the founders and the management teams that I would support as a CF advisor, but then look from the different lens of an investor, and how we can then back them and help them grow and achieve their goals and ambitions over the long term.
And did that, glass half full kind of align more to your personality? Would you say that whilst restructuring was interesting, challenging, was it maybe just quite tough? Is that why you didn't see it as a long-term thing? Yeah,
I think exactly right. I always wanted to. it was a great learning, but it's not something I think I could do for the longer term. And when the opportunity arose to kind of move into something more positive, aligned with the way I look at my outlook in life, I jumped at the chance.
And not to say those are staying in restructuring.
No, not at all.
Look at life half empty, but it must be tough. For those that do stay in it for a long time, I can imagine it is tough, but they keep going, and whilst the situations are tough, you're doing a lot of help to businesses as well, and for the long term, aren't you?
Exactly, and I think it's a really important thing having that experience, is like I said before, is set me up for my later in my career. And it's just something I wanted to just use that experiences to apply it to to something a little bit more. Again, the variety is great, but just a bit more positive, where you're still you're having good outcomes from saving jobs, but if you're in corporate finance and then lastly private equity, you can grow jobs rather than save jobs. And sometimes you'll get to situations where you might have to do that and go down that route, but that's more that's the kind of environment I want to be working in the longer term.
Yeah. And then going from corporate finance, you were more lead advisory than due diligence, weren't you? Financial due diligence.
Yeah.
So going from that into private equity, again, it was the skills that you learned in corporate finance that helped you then go into private equity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's about. So I spent 8 years in corporate finance. I did do a little bit of transaction services, but it wasn't, and then also a little bit of fractional finance roles. So I was, a part-time FD and part-time group financial control of a software business. So having those operational skills in those roles helped massively in that transition to PE, to actually speak to business owners and management teams and say, I've had that operational experience as well, and I know what you've been through. And what you're going through in periods of either stress, strain, or high growth, then that really helped. And in terms of the deal advisory side of things, it's really trying to understand and unpick businesses of what their USP is when you're an advisor, understanding exactly where they sit in the market, how can they improve, what the kind of the risks and the opportunities are, and in CF you build this really high glossy plan of what they look to set to achieve, and as an advisor you look to then negotiate the best deal, whether you're on the sales side, and you try to get the best outcome for the management team and the shareholders. But then you shake hands and you walk off into the sunset, and they with their new owner or new investor. But the reason, and whilst that was great for a period of time, I'd always aspire to actually be part of that journey and create that long-term value with the management teams, rather than getting to the point where the transaction is done and you kind of walk away. I had this burning this itch that I wanted to help in the long run. So the skills I learnt there were working with primarily Scottish SMEs, and again in a variety of different sectors with different needs or requirements depending on the situation. Again, that's allowed me to and that's what I do day in, day out now in private equity, is deal with a variety of different types of personalities, how to deal with them in good and challenging circumstances, but also in a variety of different businesses and sectors, which for me keeps it really interesting.
Yeah. So that similarity. What would you say is maybe a big difference or a couple of differences between working in corporate finance, lead advisory, and private equity?
I think
just in terms of your day.
Yeah. I suppose a lot of the stuff of juggling many things, spinning many plates remains the same. The difference is that you are part of the key decision-making processes on the long term, and being part of that, a bit cheesy, but the journey that the business goes down. And I think that is the key thing. As I said, you create an information memorandum, a sales document that says, this business sits here in the market today, but we want to get to X, Y, Z in the future. Now, as an advisor, you don't really you can articulate that plan really well and outline exactly what's required to unlock that, what you think you don't have to be responsible for delivering that.
Yeah.
That's the management team, and then also the next owner. And where I work now, that I'm the next owner, I'm the investor, I'm responsible for delivering and helping deliver that plan with really ambitious quality management teams. Because ultimately we don't take operational roles. It's about helping them to guide and manage and support the businesses as they go through this journey themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on that, must be such a big milestone for businesses that take private equity investment for the first time. And even for employees as well, it's a big thing that a company's been kind of invested in, bought over. How do you practically back, the business owner or the MD, the most senior person in that business or management team, like you said?
I think it's about having that conversation of what are the first impressions of is this person or is this team backable, and then having that honest conversation of where do they see the gaps, where do they see the areas of where either, and usually with high growth businesses in particular, the CEO is wearing many hats, and they can't spend the time doing the things they want to do of really focus on the strategic goals and delivering that in the business. They're part-time FD, they're in operations, they're in many. So how do you kind of make sure we get square pegs and round pegs and round holes and freeing up time? So what do we need as a team, as a collective, to add to the management team to help unlock the growth and the success that's already been built to date? So usually that's a case of bringing in someone on board from a financial background, because typically a lot of businesses that we see at Foresight, they don't have that finance team in place. So how can we bring in someone who's a seasoned professional, who knows about the sector, who's built up teams in the past, and then can help improve the systems and the controls and the data information to help the business to take that next step. And another thing we do is we seek to bring in a chairperson to join the board. And sometimes businesses don't even have boards. They're used to doing whatever their own managers. They run it how they see fit. And I think it's about having making sure you prep them for what's going to come under private equity investment, because some business owners, you just don't, that's the first time, as you said, they're going through this for the first time. So you just have to explain to them, what the mythical beast that is private equity and what involves in the day to day. And for me, it's just trying to make sure you support them through that journey. So having someone, an experienced chair who has sat on boards or been an owner manager themselves, have been for that journey, who can speak their language, is really, really important. Because I can say one thing, but at the same time, especially if it's before the deal completes, I'm the investor. It's a slightly different nuance and lens to go. And so that's why we think that relationship of bringing on board other people who have that experience and help be really specific in terms of what they require to unlock that next stage of growth. And we think that's invaluable through that process of helping them and their mindset of, they've done that. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. Share the best practices. Share the areas of where, if I had that again, I would do it in a different way. And so you can learn from your mistakes and really give them that, professional but also emotional support in what is sometimes a very weird time for owner managers as they go through this process. Yeah,
I mean, I think those that haven't experienced private equity or know little of it might think, it's the money that's invested that's really going to change a company. And whilst that is important, you need capital to fuel growth. Would you say kind of the people element is just as important? Whether that's bringing in a chair, whether that's adding someone in those gaps to a management team, is that something that you look to do when you invest in a company, right? What's the culture like? What's the dynamics like with the senior leadership team? How can we help?
I think the culture is a really important thing. I think you have to make sure that you're aligned with the team that you're backing culturally, and I think that goes down from C-suite to where I visit, offices or factory floors, speaking to the receptionists, speaking to people on the shop floor to try and understand and get a feel, the vibe of the business that you're trying to back. So I think, that cultural piece is really important. And ultimately, yes, you're backing people. We are hands-on in terms of we'll be actively involved in the business and making sure that we're involved with all the kind of key decisions in terms of through its strategic journey. But we're not hands-on operationally in the day-to-day. Don't put me in charge of a precision engineering business and tell me how to do this certain processes. I'll not be able to tell you. Yeah. I'm going to trust the experts and the teams that we back to be able to do that. Albeit, you pick up pieces of information and best in class, best in practice along the way, and you become a mini sector expert along different sectors as you invest in and review different opportunities. But ultimately, it is a people business, and backing the right people and that chemistry. Because if it's wrong, even if the business has a fantastic market position, it has a fantastic product or services that they're selling, but that chemistry between investor and management team / owners isn't right, it's probably going to break and fall down in the future. So get that right first, have that honest discussion that you can share the same goals and ambitions of where you see the business going in the next 3, 4, 5 years. Because if you don't get that right, then the relationship will probably break later down the line.
Yeah, and I mean, what information do companies seek from you when they're kind of getting to know the investor, and how important is that mutual transparency as well?
Yeah, I suppose from an investor, they want to know, do you have the capital to invest not only today but in the future? How committed is that capital? So there are some investors who only look at things on a deal by deal basis, where they have to effectively go back to a variety of different investors to obtain further capital. For Foresight, that's not an issue from our side, which is great. So it gives that, I suppose, that certainty of understanding what is the capital required for. So say we buy a business, and whoever they want to make further acquisitions themselves, does Foresight have the financial firepower to continue to back that team, or open up a new, expand into new geographies? Do you have the financial firepower? So do you have the track record? Do you have the track record of investing in the sectors that we back? We're sector agnostic. We invest across a variety of different sectors, and within the 65 plus people across our 11, 12 offices across the UK and Ireland, there's someone within the team that has that sector experience of know-how of what good looks like and what bad looks like. So I think it's about that's really important for businesses to really understand what we can bring to the table. And I think it's about the alignment piece again as well, where the management teams that we back, some of them will have different age profiles of understanding what's this. Is this the first transaction of many? And they want to, for us, we'll be custodians for a period of time and then move on to, we'll look to exit, realise our value, return value to our shareholders, and as well as return value for the shareholders and the management teams that we back. But ultimately, we need to understand what their ambitions are so we can plan ahead for the future. So if there's an MD or a CEO in place where they're looking to retire in the next 3, 4, 5 years, then we can start planning for that on day one of the investment to make sure that there is a seamless transition. And likewise for any other roles within the senior management team that we think they wanted to make sure that we can match what they're looking for. So again, it's about having that honest conversation of kind of what their aspirations are, and then trying to hopefully that we're both aligned in that.
Yeah. So that's all spoken about up front as you get to know each other before you enter anything formally.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like you say, so it obviously helps if the business owner, the MD, kind of, would you say, knows what the plan is, like in their eyes for the next 5 years in terms of growth? Or, do you kind of chat to some business owners who who say, right, I've got 3 paths I can go down, not sure which one to go down. Do you help with that or not?
I think you go for the options up front to understand what direction of travel you want to go down and have that discussion early doors. Now things change. So I think you create a set of financial forecasts and a plan, and as soon as you finish writing them, they're immediately out of date. So I think you have to be dynamic and trying to work with business owners and management teams to understand, I suppose, based on the current information they have at the moment, where do they think the best way to go, where they think the best course of action is and what path to go in, those options. But I think it's then sometimes you have imperfect information. So sometimes you have to have based on our best estimate and knowledge within the sector or our experience today or the management team's previous experiences, good and bad, then you just have to make a decision. And I think it's sometimes you have to make that sooner than you would maybe like, but ultimately what you have to then make sure is you've got, and it goes back to that kind of adding additional systems, controls, processes, procedures, data, information from especially a financial or an operation viewpoint where you can make decisions, track the data and performance of that, and then you can say in 3, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the line of whether that decision and path that you chose was correct. Because I think the problem with a lot of SMEs is that they're fantastic at what they do and their expertise in that certain sector or services, but sometimes they do fly with blind. And it's just, well, we've always done that. Why do you do that? Well, because we have. I've always done it. But why? This is about why have you done this? It's trying to go in different layers of the onion to really ascertain and almost like try to take their thinking process and the way they look at things, the entrepreneurial flair, and almost like try to, can we put that into some sort of processes and systems that you can get more predictable outcomes in decision making, and then that's the difficulty. But you don't want to lose the spark, the entrepreneurial flair that's kind of made the business successful in the first place, and you don't want to make it too formulaic. But at the same token, you want to try to have a way to objectively analyze the changes that you're making and improvements that you hope will make. Because if you can't do that, then you can't see what's working, what's not, and therefore making changes if it isn't working.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. And I think it's definitely an important consideration, of that flair and agility and the dynamics of the individual. So that's helpful. And just to be clear, what different ways do Foresight support growing companies then, just for people listening who might not be aware?
So just to be clear, we focus across the UK and Ireland, and we have a number of funds to do that. We invest 2 to 15 million on day one to SMEs, and so we focus across both a variety of different sectors. So, like I said earlier, industrials, consumer, software, healthcare, business services, and the variety of different transactions we can facilitate. Whether it be growth capital, so businesses that are looking to scale, typically fast-growing businesses, where we deploy capital from our VCTs, so a venture capital trust fund. We support management buyouts, so where there's a disconnect between shareholders and the management team, where the shareholders built the business, they've brought in a management team over the years, they might have a bit of the equity but not a lot of it, and the main shareholder, the vendor, is not involved in that day-to-day anymore and wants an exit. And the management team seek a financial partner and someone like Foresight to effectively buy out the vendor, the main shareholder, to then support them. Because I think a lot of again, back to the point before, businesses, SMEs in particular, where they've got an owner manager that's built the business from scratch. They know what they know. They're very good at what they've built to date. Yeah. But the management team underneath maybe has been slightly constrained of where they see the new opportunity and where, but they need someone to kind of unlock that. So buying them out and then supporting them for whatever ways we can, whether that's providing further capital to grow into new markets, to expand into new products, new services, or whether it's a case of supporting that management team to fund further acquisitions themselves, and then making sure that the management team that we're backing are well incentivized to do so. Because I think sometimes through incentive equity pools, so sometimes we find when we speak to businesses that the management team in place, especially if they don't have any of the shareholder of the equity of the business that they're in and creating all the value, right? Well, I don't have any means or ways to effectively buy out the vendor, but we can effectively do that by providing equity. It's what we call sweet equity to effectively incentivize them to grow the business. They don't need to put their hands in the pocket from a cash point of view to facilitate the transaction. Whilst that's nice to have and it shows the commitment, it's not required or to unlock the transaction. So that's management buyouts. Management buy-ins are effectively where there isn't really a secondary management team in place to support. It could be, and those are typically more known in family-owned businesses where it's just been generation after generation in the family, and it comes to year in third, fourth generation, and son or daughter doesn't want to continue running the family business. They'd much rather do whatever they want to pursue in their career. So, but there might be really good people within the team who are really good at day to day, but lack that, I suppose, strategic vision to take the business forward. And so that's a situation where typically we would then find a management team effectively to buy in to the opportunity and effectively back them, who are completely cold to the business, but will have some industry or sector experience and experience of growing and then selling businesses thereafter. So slightly different nuance to the management buying, whether that's backing an incumbent team. And then I suppose the other kind of main thread is what we call equity release deals. So where, again, there's a management team and shareholders in situ. They've invested blood, sweat and tears into the business over the years, still have a lot left to give and still see a really good growth opportunity for the business, but all their equity and investment is tied up within the business that they've helped create. So what we do is say, well, let's try to reward the hard work you've undertaken over the years, and you can de-risk and take some money off the table now, and thereafter we can provide further capital. Again, it's about adding in, filling the gaps, the perceived gaps, where what we talked about earlier, where there's just something missing, whether that is that strategic chairperson, whether that's that financial person coming in, whether it's an operations person, and then add into the team to supplement what's already a really good team, but help kind of complete the team, so to speak. So that's probably the four main areas of growth capital: MBOs, MBIs, and equity release deals that we kind of cover at Foresight. And because it's the variety is, again, to what we discussed, that's what I love about the role, is that one day you're speaking to a manufacturing business, the next day you're speaking to an e-commerce business, next time it's a medical device business. It really is the variety that keeps me really interested and engaged.
Yeah, it must be so interesting speaking to owners, learn about businesses and then the options to grow strategically. So yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I mean, how would you say, what is the private equity market like in Scotland? People talk about accessibility to private equity, and maybe there's not so much of it up in Scotland as there is down south. How would you say that market is up here?
Well, I think I'd say when I first started working in corporate finance back in 2015, there's been a lot more capital available in Scotland now than it was back then. Even such as ourselves, who we set up our office in Edinburgh back in 2019, and since have invested, I think, 58 million across different businesses in Scotland, which is really, really positive, and want to do more of that. I think sometimes Scotland, compared to other areas of the UK, I don't think it's now necessarily underserved or underserved compared to a private equity or an investment perspective. I just think that compared to maybe other areas of the UK, London or say the Northwest and Manchester and Liverpool, etc., that there hasn't been enough success stories in that space in private equity, where in SMEs and exits, where you can just speak to the person. So, how is your experience of working with private equity? What did you encounter? How does that make you feel? What were the kind of positive? What were the obviously sometimes there's negatives. And I just don't think there has been enough of the volume in the market, and I think a lot of it goes down to that. I suppose especially the MBI situation I talked about, where there isn't that incumbent team, and therefore the ultimate, I suppose, the easy option for some businesses, and sometimes it might be the right one, is that I want to sell to a strategic trade, like a competitor, a larger competitor. I mean, but I think there's a lot of business owners out there that would rather, I suppose, the legacy, the brand, the name that they've built, not get lost in a situation where they've been bought over by someone else. That's ultimately what will happen. Likely further, I suppose, synergies or cost efficiencies where teams are effectively slightly downsized of going down that trade route. And I think genuinely now, and I spoke with us in particular, well, we see that as a real opportunity for us to back what is I think quite a buoyant market of great opportunities. It's just trying to unlock them and find them to then back them. I think for us, for example, we've just closed 2 transactions. We've closed 2 transactions in November where we've backed 2 completely different businesses in Scotland. One being a business called Quality Food Products, where it's a business, a food processor of meat products in Aberdeen, where, again, to my previous example, family-run business for kind of 40, 50 years. We've found an executive chair who's experience of the sector. We found an MD that wasn't one. We found an FD, again, wasn't one, all pre-deal. So I think for us, it's a real landmark investment into Scotland, where just because there's no secondary management team in place, that it doesn't mean that that private equity, especially with Foresight, can't facilitate a transaction. And then secondly, again, slightly differently, we backed the business called J&S Subsea, which is an engineering business focused in the repair provision for subsea control systems. Again, back to my point earlier, of business has been going for a long time. Team have been in situ for and wanted to add to that senior management team, so we brought on an FD, a new chairperson to help, who've got experience of expanding their service line into new geographies, and I think again that adds the value that we bring to SMEs of within the existing team. Really great, but wanted that extra help where they didn't have that coverage. So I think that it's 2 examples of where I think we're adding to the story of greater access to capital in Scotland.
Great, yeah, no, I saw the kind of press releases about those 2. So if people are listening and are interested, they can, I suppose, Google and they'll find all the press about that. And obviously, we're in December at the moment. I think this podcast will come out in January. But looking ahead, looking at 2025. How do you see the market being for private equity?
I think positive. I think in 24, despite all the various headwinds in the economy of the world, I suppose, across Foresight, we've, I think, invested in 24 new businesses across and had a number of exits as well. a lot of really positive ones as well. So I think in the challenging environment in 24, we were able to achieve that. I think 24 is going to be quite buoyant, and we're quite upbeat and positive about it. The uncertainty, I suppose, the fact that we have certainty in the market where Labour delivering their budget, while some impactful for some businesses in a negative way, I think it allows businesses now to know the unknowns in that regard, and hopefully, there'll be a lot of activity going to 25, which I just look to continue to meet and help and develop SMEs as and when I meet them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm having discussions with people in your world and corporate finance, and I think the last quarter this year has been quite busy, and there's an expectation that, pre kind of April, we're up to the end of the tax year, is going to be busy as well. So, hopefully it is, and it's a successful year next year for everybody. Thanks so much for coming on today, talking about all that. It's really interesting, really, great insights, and a lot for people to take away. So do appreciate your time as well. I know you've got a lot on. Just as we wrap up as well, I do like to ask our guests just about the next 12 months in terms of, personal goals that you have and professional goals. So you got any of those?
Yeah, I suppose professionally it's just trying to do more of the same, of trying to meet really ambitious, driven management teams and business owners across Scotland, and continue to do what we've done in 24. From a kind of a personal experience viewpoint, to spend more time with my family if I can. I've got 2 young daughters, 7 and 4, that keep me busy, and my wife, and just trying to spend a bit more quality time with them, and probably need to trying to get some more into fitness again. I've kind of neglected that for probably, the last 4 or 5 years. So I think 2025 is going to be the year where I'm finally going to dust off the running shoes again and start getting out and get back, trying to pick an event or something to go to, so I can strive. Because I think if I don't pick something, then I'll never get fit again. So that's probably from a personal point of view.
I think I'm the same as well, and just on that point, a couple of years ago I entered a 10k, and that made me run in preparation, whereas didn't pick anything this year. We've not done much at all. So
yeah, exactly.
You're right, maybe I should pick something as well. Well, no, all the best with that. We'll be in touch, and see how you get on with both of those. So thanks again for your time, Duncan.
Thanks a lot, Craig. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Professional Speaks podcast. This podcast was produced by Springwood Studio Productions. Remember, you can watch the episode recording on our YouTube channel, and if you can, please do subscribe and share with all of your friends. The more people who listen to this, the more guests we can have on to share, so that you can learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what you want to achieve in your career. Please also contact me if you have any feedback on this episode. I'd love to hear from you.